I'm just going to roll into this, but I do want, I would love a show of hands first just to see how many former newspaper photographers I'm speaking to. I know this keeps getting asked, but okay, that's awesome. And how many photo-a-dayers? How many old school?
Yeah!
Yes, okay, this is awesome. Hopefully this resonates, and if I'm speaking to something that doesn't directly apply to your workload or what it is you're doing, glean what you can from it. I'm going to talk about finding ideas, coming up with stories, and hopefully it's stuff that you guys can take back to your spots in the world and kind of use a little bit of it to make your own lives better for your university communities, but also for yourself, and just trying to please yourself by making pictures that make you happy while doing your workload. So, brief background, I grew up in Florida, born and raised. Wanted to be a veterinarian. That's all I did all through high school. It was like math and science classes, loaded up on them. Went to a community college, just trying to like save money and live at home and just get all the stuff, all the prereqs I needed to transfer to Auburn, actually, which is where I was going to go because they had a school at Auburn. But the last semester at community college, my counselor came to me and said, this is awesome that you've taken every science class that we offer, but you need an arts elective in order to graduate with your AA. And I'd already set my schedule, and I looked, and the only thing that fit it was a black and white photo class. And I mean, for those of you who remember dark rooms, like walking in there, it did something to me that like biology and anatomy and physiology weren't doing. But it also took this like introverted kid, and it gave me this excuse to go out in the world and talk to people and kind of have this passport into other people's lives and situations that I might have been too timid to without this instrument. And it changed everything. And I remember going back to that guidance counselor and saying like, well, you've done it. It's kind of ruined my plans here. I thought I knew my path, and what do I do with this photography thing? And to her credit, she said, well, newspapers need photographers. And I grew up in Jacksonville, that's where I was going to this community college. And she said, there's a great journalism school right down the road at the University of Florida. Go Gators. And she said, why don't you go down there and see if you can transfer in. And so that's where I ended up. I got a journalism degree. I did 4 internships and was on my way to my 5th. And I was a staff photographer at some great papers, first in Fort Lauderdale, and then at the St. Pete Times for a decade. And I really specialized in storytelling. I was sort of a general assignment photographer, but I was the one that they would bring in as like, well, we have this great sports photographer. We don't want you to go sit in the first or third base well and like do the play at the plate or whatever, but like, can you go tell the story of this team, or can you go tell the story of these fans? And that was where I sort of carved out my niche as a newspaper photographer, was like being the cleanup hitter, and just kind of going in and telling these like featured stories and getting into people's lives. And so I'm going to show you guys a little bit of progression and kind of show you how that's bleeding into some of the work I'm doing now. So the basics, right? Photography is light, moment, composition. Like for me, those are key. If you've got one of these things, it's probably a good photo, But if you can work light and moment in, it's probably a pretty great photo. And then you work like composition in there, and it's, you've cleaned it up, you've removed that telephone pole, you've shifted your angle a little bit, and you've nailed all 3 of those. Like those are the portfolio images. Those are the things that really jump out. So, especially those younger in your careers, like try to get one of these in every photo. And then spend a little bit of time working on the other ones. Like if you're seeing the light, amazing, use it. And then wait for a moment to happen in that light, And it's like, I'll kind of walk you through a little bit, but, like for me, light was key. And that was what I was seeing early on. When I got to when I interviewed at the St. Pete Times, they said, well, what would you want to do if we hired you? Like, spitball for us. What's your dream? And I said, I would love to have a photo column. And I had just heard this story on This American Life, and it was on the classified section of the newspaper. And I said, I I would do a photo column called Declassified. And I'm totally like riffing here, like in a meeting with some editors. I said I would find stories in the classified ads of our newspaper, and I would print that ad again, and then I would like tell this cool little story from it. And I got hired, and they said, when are you starting on your column? I said, okay, right on. This was one of my first, and I still remember it. It was 2 chickens found, tame, called to identify. And I called, and you know, it's kind of that weird, like, hey, my name's Melissa, I'm a photographer with the CP Times. I saw your ad, they're not my chickens. I just, you know, I'm really curious about it. I'd love to come, this is what I'm doing. Can I come make some pictures? And she said, yeah, like my daughter wants to be a veterinarian and work with animals, so she's kind of raising them right now until we find their owners. The chickens' names were baked and fried, like it was a great story. And so I just like, she said, why don't you come after school when my daughter gets home and, you know, just come hang out. And she feeds them, she cleans their little area, she plays with them. And, you know, like I saw this light, like when I walked into this backyard and I like, you know, put my hand in it real quick, meter, I know what it is. And the daughter says, you want to see him fly? And I was like, oh, change settings, you know. And, you know, and it was just this like quick moment, but into this light out of this darkness. And it's like, see the light and find it, and it completely elevates your photos. Moments, you know, this is the Little League World Series. 3 photographers at my paper turned this down because they didn't want to go hang out with a bunch of 12-year-olds in the middle of Pennsylvania for a while. My kids made it to the World Championship game against Team Asia. So I got to stay for about 3 weeks and tell the story of these Florida boys who lost. The yellow jersey is from Boynton Beach, Florida. They lost to the Asian kids from Japan, like 10-1. They got spanked. It was the greatest single display of sportsmanship at any sporting event I've ever seen, where like the Japanese team picked my kids up and are celebrating with them for a good series and throwing them up in the outfield after they beat them by 10-1. And you know, and it was like, this is the moment. This says everything to me about the Little League World Series. Composition. You know, I shot a car show a week when I was a staff photographer in Fort Lauderdale. This is a weekly feature hunt. And you see fins like this and this cool pink car, and I was like, I'm just gonna wait and make something weird. You know, and I probably worked reflections and hubcaps and windows and shot through things, and then I saw these little heads walking by the fins, and it was like, oh, that's kind of weird and quirky. You know, and so it's like if nothing else is coming together, like look for cool compositions, just as a way to kind of intrigue the reader and a way to sort of get your picture looked at a little bit longer. So here's the secret, right? There isn't one. You just have to do the work. There are no shortcuts. You literally just have to make pictures every single day. You have to have your camera with you. You've got to be comfortable with the settings. You've got to know how it works. And you've got to get yourself comfortable talking to people and getting into their worlds if that's the kind of photography you want to do. So early in my career, I would take every slop assignment that nobody else wanted. Oh, the state fair is here again. I've covered it for 15 years. I was like, I'll go. Just looking for light on the midway. Just looking for like fun little moments of people celebrating. Every year I give myself a theme, you know, like let's do love on the midway. Let's do the color red, you know, and just give yourself a challenge to make different pictures. You know, I saw a flyer on a bulletin board. I read a lot of, that was where I got my ideas early on, you know, doing laundry at a laundromat and seeing Super Dave is performing at the Demolition Derby this week. And I called and I said, hey, Super Dave, what is it you do? And he said, oh, I crashed my car into an RV and it sets itself on fire. And I said, can I be there for that? That's amazing. And like these yahoos, like they gave me a jacket and like no protective gear. I'm out on the field with them, you know. And it was such a fun little moment. And then Dave gets out and everybody cheers. But it's like just this peak curiosity of like, what makes Super Dave super? And so I spent some time with him, getting to know him a little bit. And driving back to the newspaper one day after covering something else, and I see this mom blowing up an inflatable pool. These projects, it was all Section 8 housing, and it was maybe 2 minutes from my newspaper's office. I pulled up, I walked over there, I introduced myself. She says, y'all never come over here unless it's bad news. I said, I know, and I'm really sorry about that. I said, let me make it up to you. And she said, what do you want? I said, I just want to hang out. Like, your kids are adorable. It's a hot day. Like, I'm looking for a weather feature of people kind of out playing and, you know, maybe splashing around and stuff. Can I just hang out? You know, within 5 minutes, the kids forgot I was there after they showed off and blew bubbles and, you know, acted like kids. And, you know, just kind of made this quiet moment. Took a bunch of prints back and a bunch of newspapers back and ended up going over there a lot to look for stories and to talk to people because the newspaper really had forgotten about it. It was such a good entry in because I'd go back and this woman would introduce me. Hey y'all, this is the lady that took the picture of us in the pool. And I had this like instant person vouching for me. And it made a lot of inroads. Yeah. Putting my cameras in a car, you know, put them in the trunk after an assignment, and I get this tap on the back of my shoulder. Boom. And I turn around and there's this little screen mask. She's got her little Mary Jeans falling down. I don't know why she's crossing her fingers, you know. And this little man rolls up on his BMX to kind of see what we're doing. And it was like, you know, I have all these pictures where these kids say, take my picture. And I just humor them. Like I joke I'm going to have a book someday called Take My Picture. You know, hey miss, take my picture. I can blow the biggest bubble you've ever seen. I said, all right, man, show me. Take my picture. I can dive into this and keep my legs straight like those Olympic divers. I said, show me, little guy. Yeah, and just doing it. This is an iPhone photo. I could hear this car coming before I could see it. And I look in my rear view and I see this yellow car and I'm at a light and I look over and there's this yellow building and I was like, they can honk at me all they want. And I just went, all I had, my cameras are in the trunk, unfortunately, you know, it's stupid me, but I had my iPhone there, just picked up, and as this lady kind of ambled by, made a few frames, and it screamed Florida to me, you know, and it was, iPhones are good enough, that this was a 5-column photo in the St. Pete Times. You know, got invited to a 100-year-old birthday party for Mr. Newton here. Saw this on the bulletin board at my dog park, Dalmatian meetup group Saturday morning. I was like, well, that's going to be cool, you know? And then people show up in like Dalmatian-looking pants that they'd homemade, you know, with little patches they sewed on. I was like, oh, this is a fun little feature. You know, and then I started telling stories. This was on a group of a sibling set of 5 kids that were in and out of motels their whole life, and you know, just kind of telling the story of every kid in his family. And I love that the little guy, the youngest one, rolled up and was sort of imitating Dad, telling Megan no when she did something wrong. So there are no shortcuts, right? Like, I'm a big believer in Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000-hour rule. You literally have to put in the work. So, as Gladwell says, it's 10,000 hours of intensive practice to achieve mastery. That breaks down to 417 days worth of hours if you're working a 24-hour day, which none of us are. You know, and so if not, for the average person, that's about 10 years of trying to master a complex skill. That's 10 years until you sort of hit that plateau where you're just climbing and climbing and climbing, exponentially getting better and learning, and then you get it, something snaps. So for those of you who haven't reached the 10-year mark, like, keep climbing. Don't get frustrated because it is coming. You gotta suck early on, and you've got to learn from that suck. I have a lot of suck that you're not seeing here, but there's, you know, it's like, learn from your mistakes and take those risks now, especially when people aren't looking as much, and take those chances. And you know, I used to tell our interns in St. Pete all the time, like, look, you get 2 hours on this assignment. You can make a mediocre picture in 5 minutes. Like, you know what the business section wants. It's a portrait of this guy at his desk with his computer, whatever. Make that picture when you walk in, and spend the next hour and 55 minutes playing. Like, make a cool picture for yourself. And that's how I learned how to light things, and how I learned how to work on composition, and just, it's that risk-taking as long as you're learning from it. So experiment and have fun with it. The beauty of digital is, like, don't delete on camera, please, because, like, we're not good editors of our own work, especially if it's on, like, a 3-inch LCD. But, like, take that risk, and if it didn't work, it didn't work. It's something you can delete when you get back and you've had a chance to edit and look through, or have a trusted editor look through. and like make those mistakes, but like when something works, learn from it. Like, why did this work? Why do I like this so much? Oh, that's kind of cool and weird. What did I do differently here? Look at your settings and just kind of figure out how to use that to your advantage next time. Macklemore even wrote a song about it. It's called the 10,000 Hour Rule, and I'm not going to sing or rap for you, but he says the grades weren't great because they could paint. The grades were great because they paint a lot. And just take that forward with you and just make pictures every day. Get those 10,000 hours in. So this transitions to like the serious newspaper work, right? I wanted to be a conflict photographer as a young photographer. I wanted to do the heavy work that like my heroes were doing. I got the opportunity to go to Israel and Gaza in 2003, 2004, and because another photographer couldn't go, and I was sort of next up on the list because I'd expressed an interest. My paper was going a lot because of the population in South Florida. And so I got to go, and I got to spend 3 weeks mostly on the Gazan side. This is Al-Shifa Hospital, which is no longer there. The silver-haired man in the middle is Dr. Ahmad Tabri, who was Lebanese by birth, Floridian by, where he happened to be practicing medicine. And every year, he would take all of the residents on spring break or Christmas break back to this hospital in Gaza because the need for heart surgeons were so great there. And he would do 10 or 12 heart surgeries a day. And so we went, local man does good, but like to get this access and to be in the room. And at one point, Dr. Tabri turns to me and says, "Melissa, have you ever held a heart?" And he puts it in my hand, and it's still beating out of someone's body. And it still gives me chills to think about, but it was like such a surreal experience. And to know that this hospital no longer exists is absolutely insane. And it just made me think of him all over again in recent months. But this is what I wanted to do, right? And I'm like trying to figure out how to tell stories overseas. This is in Pakistan right after Bin Laden was killed. I got to go for about a month. And this is feature hunting 101. We're driving somewhere else, and I tell my driver, I say, "Shahid, can we stop real quick? Like, I just want to make a quick picture." And he says, yeah, be quick. And I said, is this a dangerous neighborhood? Like, what should I know? And he said, no, they're going to be so curious about you. You're literally going to get about 2 or 3 minutes. And he was right. Everybody wanted to come over and say hi and know why I was there and talk to me in English. And hello. And I had this crowd of like 300 people that had come out of the woodwork to see why I was in their neighborhood. But in the 3 minutes I got to work, like I made a weather feature, and just kind of daily life in Pakistan. This is Haiti after the earthquake. Just got myself on an aid truck that was rolling through Port-au-Prince. Ended up staying for a month or so that first time after the earthquake, and this was the church service that had reopened about 1 month following, just kind of on the rubble of their former church. And so I'm telling stories there, and I'm trying to get to know people and dig a little deeper. I met Daniel Thalusmar, the guy in the blue shirt holding the baby. I met him in a weird food situation in Haiti. He was helping get some aid on a truck, and he starts speaking to me in English. And he says, "Where are you from?" And I said, I live in Tampa. And he says, "Hey, me too." I was like, "No kidding, that's amazing. What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I was born in Haiti, and my brother's family, their house collapsed, and they have a 2-week-old baby, my niece, that I hadn't met yet, so I came over to help out." And he was so useful, though, to the aid communities because he spoke English and because he spoke Creole that he just ingratiated himself, and he was working for USAID and everyone else that needed him while he was there. And so Daniel and I exchanged info, and I said, "Yeah, we should go get a drink or something when you're back in Tampa. Like, I'd love to get to know you more." And about 2-3 months later, Daniel calls, and he says, "Hey, Melissa," he's like, "You know that apartment building?" And he like describes a street. It looks like it's been vacant for a while. He said, "I got them to let me use it for Haitian medical refugees that were bringing over to Florida to get treatment." He's like, "Do you want to come hang out?" I said, "You bet I do." And so he had brought over like 100, through his help, got visas for medical refugees to come get treatment at Tampa General Hospital. And so I just went and started hanging out in this apartment complex as much as I could. Here's Daniel all dressed up. This is his daughter who wanted to pray with this young man whose legs were crushed in the rubble of his house. And then she got really shy and kind of hid behind Daniel to say her prayers. But it was just this brief conversation and this connection with Daniel that led me to like all of these Haitian stories in my own backyard, which was amazing because for those of you who were at newspapers in the early aughts, this is about when newspapers said, we have no more money for anything ever. We have budget cuts, there's no more travel, we're laying people off, there's going to be buyouts. And no, Melissa, you cannot go to Haiti again for a long, long time. And I said, okay, I'm going to keep telling the Haitian story though, because I know there's 100 people that were just brought over in my backyard. So all that to say, stories are everywhere. I thought I wanted to do one thing, and the newspaper world very quickly showed me there was a limited window for me to do that. And now it was my opportunity to continue telling those stories locally. Because everyone has a story, right? Like every single person you talk to has something going on that you are not aware of. As a young photographer, I learned from some writers very quickly not to assume that I knew what someone's story was. So if I'm sitting with someone and I'm like working on a new project, during downtime I would always get in the habit of saying like, hey, if you had to use 3 words to describe yourself, like 3 adjectives, how would you describe yourself to someone that doesn't know you? And I use this, I'll show you another motel project that I did later in my career coming up here, but I'm sitting there with one of the moms that lives in this motel, and you can pass judgment on a homeless person really quickly. You're like, I know your story, you're lazy, like all the stuff that gets ingrained from media and TV and movies and stuff. And this mom who's living in this motel with her young boy says, I'm the hardest working person you'll ever meet. I have 4 jobs right now. None of them will hire me full time. I am busting my ass trying to keep a roof over our heads. And it's my ex-husband who ran our credit into the ground and got us kicked out of this house. And now I'm in a motel with my kid, just trying to feed him. And I said, tell me about that. She said, I'm so resilient. She's like, I will knock on any door. I will talk to anyone to try to get a job. I am just trying to give a better life to my kid. And it completely shattered all these notions of like who you might think she is upon first meeting her. And so I'm writing these words that Lori, it's her name, you'll see her in a sec. I'm writing these words that Lori was giving me down in a notebook. And it was like, how do you then, instead of shooting nouns and verbs, right? Like homeless mom works job, homeless mom rides bus, like that's noun and verb. How do you say like, this hardworking woman is the most resilient woman? How do you make a picture of hardworking? What does that look like? Is that her waking up before dawn while everybody else is sleeping in the motel room? Is that her coming home after a long day, like passing out on the bed, still in her waitress uniform? Like, make a picture of hardworking. Shoot the adjectives and adverbs and not the nouns and verbs. And like tell a story. Like that's, Lit 101, storytelling 101. Like I'm a big reader, and so I look at words as sort of what the picture of these words be. This is a story I did a while back called The Girl in the Window. It came from a source from another story that really liked what we did. And she called one day and talked to the writer and I, and she said, if you guys don't want to tell this story, I'm not going to give it to anyone else. But we found this feral child living in a room, locked in a room in her mom's house. And there's this amazing family who's going to adopt her. And if you want us to introduce you to the adopted family, let us know. And we ended up following Danny and her family for about 3 years. I left the paper shortly after, and they did a 10-year follow-up recently. But this was a story that the writer won a Pulitzer for called The Girl in the Window. And, it's just hanging out, just trying to show connection. That was one of my words with Danny. As a feral child, she was locked in a room for about the first 6.5 years of her life. When they found her, she was in a diaper that was so swollen it had probably been on her for weeks at this point. It leaked all over the police's uniform when he lifted her up out of there. Bed bugs and everything crawling on her head to toe. She weighed about 25 pounds at 6 years old. And, got a lot of medical help. And this family who wanted to adopt had seen her picture in this like adoption catalog and started to inquire about her. They didn't want a medically needy kid. They had 4 other kids. And, but they absolutely fell in love with this little girl. And when they met her, they said, that's our daughter, let's go get her. And so this is Danny and her social worker, who's the first person she was able to actually touch physically. She had never been held, from what we could gather. She freaked out when the wind blew because she had never felt wind on her skin. And so like making this connection with Garrett, her social worker, while they're watching the cartoons one day, and Danny just leans over and touches heads with her. You know, it's like, that's it. Like, this is how I show connection. This is how I show her starting to come out of her shell and bond with the world. You know, and her brother in the family, who's about the same age, you know, he can brush his own teeth, get himself ready. Like, she's still very much a toddler in this aspect, and just trying to show how much help she needs in subtle ways. When I went back 3 years later, I realized I was making a lot of the same pictures. Just sitting in my hotel room editing one night after a shoot, you know, the picture on the right is from 3 years later, and I said, I feel like I made a really tight portrait of her, like when I first met her. Looked through my archives, and I kind of pair them together into this diptych. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I wondered how many more of these I could do. And so I just started going through, and like, you know, you can see she's grown a foot. She's now kissing her dad on the nose on the right. Like, look at this connection. Like, she's giving a hug back. She's lifeless on the left. Like, she didn't know how to be loved. And so, you know, she'd been learning sign language at school because she couldn't communicate because her brain had atrophied, not being talked to for the first 6 years. But she learned how to say more, and, you know, she showed us that when we went out to dinner with her. You know, and just trying to make some pictures that told these stories. Still got the same glowworm, you know, years later. Still her comfort. Still having meltdowns at things because of the failure to communicate. Like, she was locked in and could not speak. She could understand pretty well. You could tell her, pick something up or sit in the back seat or can you go here or do this. But she couldn't speak back. And, you know, imagine the frustration there. So, especially when she was older, like on the right, like we're at a state fair and she just, you know, just had a moment. And it reminded me so much of this moment that I saw when she was a 7-year-old in her dad's arms at the beach. And so I got to revisit my motel story. This is about 10 years later, different motel. And like, to tell you guys, like, stories literally are everywhere. I'm driving my car, I'm listening to NPR, and they said, right now in the state of Florida, there are more school bus stops in front of motels than in front of residential subdivisions. I was like, that cannot be true. Are you kidding me? I literally, like, my car went on autopilot. I drove to like the first motel that I passed on US 19, and I just went into the office there and I said, hey, is the manager here? And they bring this woman, Renee, out, and I said, hey, my name's Melissa Lyttle, I'm a photographer with the Times. I just heard this on the radio. Like, are you guys seeing this? Is this true? She goes, oh, baby, you have no idea. She's like, I've got like 25 school buses that come out here every day we got 100 kids living here right now. And I said, can I come hang out and tell this story? And she literally went, you guys, this is Melissa, she's from the Times, you let her in anytime. And that was it. Like, Renee had vouched for me and got me in. And so she said, do you want to go into somebody's motel room? You obviously need to get permission from them. But on the public stuff, at the pool, at the benches, in the parking lot, you can go wherever you want. You got my blessing. And I said, okay, what time do the buses start coming? I'll start with that. And I just started going. I would take a brown bag lunch. I would eat it there at their picnic tables. I would go in the morning with a coffee and just hang out at the school bus stop and talk to families. Started working my way into rooms, you know, and just getting in there. This is Lori, the mom I mentioned, the hardworking, resilient one with 4 jobs. She hurt her back waitressing. And this is her on the bed in the background, in a lot of pain, and did not have insurance, could not get the meds that she needed that might help her out. And told Andre to fix his own dinner, so he grabbed a frozen waffle out of the little mini fridge in the room, and I just started spending time with him. And it was 3 generations living in one hotel room. It was Andre, Lori, and then Lori's mom. This is Lori's mom going to pick him up and bring him back for dinner one night. And just like, they were my family. Like, I still text her, I still keep in touch. And this was the day they get evicted from, or kicked out, I guess. You're not really evicted if you're not actually paying for the place. But, you know, failure to pay. After she hurt herself with these jobs, she couldn't come up with the $35 a night to stay in this motel. And so as I start digging, I asked Renee, the manager, hey, why are there so many families in this motel? And she said, because there are no beds in the family shelter area in our county. There's 6 beds, and the waiting list is 3 years long. And so if a family gets picked up as homeless on the street, they're given a 3-day voucher to stay in one of these hotels or motels on US 19. And that's how a lot of them end up here. And then it's up to them to start paying the $35 a night after their voucher runs out. Lori was able to scrape together the money for months and months. And then I get a text one day that said, Melissa, she's like, we're packing up. My friend's coming to get me soon. Do you want to come? And yeah, I just called my photo editor and said, hey, I need to head over to the Mosley Motel because stuff's going down. He said, yeah, we'll reassign whatever. You know, and then just as they're getting kicked out, Andre had made a friend who lived in the little motel room next door. He'd never had a friend before because he'd been homeless for 5 years and he never lived in a place long enough to make friends. And, you know, I lifted like a 70 to 200. I made maybe 2 or 3 frames and I put it down. And his mom saw me, she knew what I was doing. I had a nod of approval. I knew it was okay, and I knew this family well enough that I wasn't gonna cause much more pain, but, you know, just a simple, I've got it. Like, I don't need to motor drive through this kid's pain. I've got a moment. And it's like, this moment told so much about, like, what he was feeling. He wasn't sad to be leaving the Mosley, he was sad to be leaving a friend. And then, a couple months later, Lori texts me and she says, hey, I got into this program that helped us get a house. I'm picking up the keys this afternoon. Do you want to meet me? And she's like twirling Andre around in the living room at their new house before they even, you know, move their stuff in. I was like, absolutely, I'll be there. Like, let's do this. Yeah. I love Florida. I'd never spent a lot of time in the Everglades, and so I was digging for stories there, and I was reading this book called Muck City, and it said that more NFL players have come out of Muck City, which is Belgrade in Pahokee, Florida, right on Lake Okeechobee in the southern middle part of the state. So more NFL players per capita have come out of Muck City than anywhere else in the country. And it was like Anquan Bolden, Kelvin Benjamin, all these guys that went on to be like pro ballers and Hall of Famers and stuff. And so I drove down to Pahokee one day and watched a football practice and started talking to the coach and just said, can you help me identify a couple of kids that I can maybe follow through their senior year of high school just to see if they make it out? I was like, and he said, yeah, what do you want? And I said, yeah, I want kids that have the talent, that can play ball, that could go to any D1 school, but there's some struggle, that there's something that they might need to overcome. He said, oh yeah, I got your guys. And so I started spending a lot of time down there. Like, these kids were raised on football in Pahokee because they knew that was a way out because of people like Anquan Bolden. And so I would just go hang out. This is, one of my main guys lived in this housing development, and this is like one of his little brothers playing, you know, just pick up Pee Wee football barefoot after school one day. And I mean, and they're starting at like 3, 4 years old, you know, with the pads on. And so this is Fred. He ended up becoming my main guy. And amazingly fast player. And he just was so close on grades. You know, he could like almost get the ACT score he needed. Almost get the test score he needed. And so this 2-year school ended up picking him up in Ellsworth, Iowa. And they were sort of a feeder school for a lot of bigger programs. And so, you know, like photographing taking his ACT and then getting his grade, and like he needed an 18 and he got a 17. You know, like, oh God, you're so close. Like, you know, and like people put so much effort into getting these kids to be good athletes that like the academics were waning. And so I just like started spending more and more time with Fred and his family. He was one of 8. His mom did such a great job though, like she knew the situation in Pahokee, she knew the temptations out there. And so she's like, scraped up money to buy a PlayStation so all of his friends would come hang out in his room so they weren't out on the streets like causing trouble. And so, this is just them on like a Friday night hanging out, like playing as the Gators on, on a football game here. And it was like, and they're watching clips on the laptop back here to see what other schools were doing. And I just would hang out and just talk to Fred and like try to tell his story. And then graduation comes and he says, "Miss, you coming to graduation?" I said, "Absolutely I am, I wouldn't miss it." Right, like the day before graduation, he calls me and he says, I got a scholarship to this 2-year school. I've never been on an airplane before. I was like, I'm a little scared. And I said, "When do you leave?" And he's like, "The day after graduation." So, all right. This is when I could still walk to the gate, and called the airline, let them know what I was doing. And just like Fred getting dropped off at the Palm Beach airport and just trying to find his way. He and one of his teammates both heading off to Iowa. He ended up at Marshall, played a couple of years there. He's now coaching back in Palm Beach County. Just had his first baby, like we're still friends, And it's like, that's what it's about. Just telling stories in your community, talking to people. I can go quick through these because there's a lot, but I moved to California for a couple of years. There's bullfighting in California. Bloodless bullfighting, it's the Portuguese community. This ring is in South LA, like that's wild to me. And I had read one sentence about the Portuguese community and this bloodless bullfighting, and I said, I wonder if that still happens. And so I started calling around, I figured out their schedule. These are like Nerf darts. There's like a Velcro pad on the bull so they're not actually injuring the animal. Little kids pretending to be bulls. It's all based around this religious ceremony, which is how they get around PETA's restrictions of abusing animals for pleasure. And so I started going to the religious ceremonies. I started hanging out in the community and getting to see what made this Portuguese community from the Azores in the Central Valley of California, what made them tick, And so I'm watching them like wrap themselves up one night, and I said, what's that all about? What's this like cool cummerbund looking thing? And he said, it's to keep our organs inside. It's like if we get gored, he's like, it's the best chance of keeping our intestines in us. And I was like, that is insane. He said, yeah, but most of us just carry our cell phones there because his pants are so tight they don't have pockets. I said, all right. So I ended up hanging out with this team of formados for a while. I'd stay in RVs with him at these events because there are no hotels for miles. They said, you want to see how we learned how to stop the bulls? And I said, yeah, absolutely, I'm coming to a practice. So they built this thing that pretends to be a bull, and that's how they learned to do this. And this is literally where grabbing the bull by the horn comes from. They're a self-described suicide squad. It's an 8-man team, and all they're trying to do is lay the bull down on the side. It is man versus beast to the nth degree, and it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. No bulls I ever saw got harmed in this, but I saw many a person with a broken rib go off in an ambulance. Luckily, intestines were kept intact, but it was a gnarly scene. And I was like, this is happening in Stockton, California? What is going on? I was like, this is so cool. And so just spending time and getting to know these guys, and the guy on the right's this legendary bullfighter from Portugal who came to do his last ever performance. And you party with them because you're there and you're hanging out and you're trying to tell the whole story, and so after the pig roast, it was throwing buddies in the fire and just hanging out late night with these guys. And that started leading me into other stories where it was like, what are these weird subcultures that I don't know about? So when I moved to DC, there was this group I read about called the Cowgirls of Color. And it was, just these amazing black chicks in Southeast DC that learned to ride, that loved the sport. They would go to like the Bill Pickett Rodeo, and then they would take their horses to community events in like Southeast DC and teach people about horses and get little kids to ride them for the first time. And I was like, this is a lovely story. Because it was in my backyard, I spent a lot of time on it whenever they would invite me out to things or I knew a rodeo was coming. And, I ended up pitching it to the Washington Post, and they ran, just sort of this beautiful double truck and like a Sunday feature section. But they did this sort of like relay game where they passed the baton like track stars, and it was really cool to see, watching their performance afterwards, just the friendships and, the community, and, you gotta get them partying and line dancing and, just telling stories. It's like I never thought that this was happening in DC, and it was literally one line I had read somewhere. I wrote down in my notebook, which is always with me, and it was just kind of like, look into this, Cowgirls of Color, And I think I found a Facebook page, I reached out to somebody, and I just started going and putting in the time. And so if it matters to you, find a way to make it matter to other people. For all the women out here, there's this amazing group called the International Women's Media Foundation, IWMF, and they have all sorts of grants and fellowships solely designed towards women photojournalists, reporters, broadcast journalists, audio folk, video folk, whatever your medium is. But it's supported by Warren Buffett's son, Howard Buffett, gave $10 million to help female journalists tell stories because he realized that there was a need. I did one of their fellowships on the border because when I was in LA, I realized I'd never been to our southern border, and I was really curious. And so I went and I just sort of made portraits at this one center where people were coming right when they got to the border to kind of get up enough energy to cross into the States in the next week or so. This is what the border wall looks like in Arizona in the part that I was in. This is a family from Honduras that had crossed over, and they walked up to the first Border Patrol agent and said that they wanted asylum. I felt horribly bad for them because I know that how this process works, and it's not as easy as they have been led to believe. This is the border wall in Juarez, Mexico, and these kids live literally in a house that they open their front door and this is what they see, this is their view. But like teenagers anywhere, like they're skateboarding and they're drinking and they're smoking and they're riding their BMX bikes, and like I remember doing all that stuff when I was their age. And I just wanted to hang out because like they're oblivious to the wall. Like to them it's a ramp and it's a place to graffiti and it's a place to hang out and it's just part of their backdrop. And so everywhere I was like, I want to see what the wall looks like here. I want to see how people respond to it here. And then I just start talking to people when I'm in Mexico, because like I admittedly didn't know the stories there. As a Floridian, I had a different set of immigrant issues. We had Haitians, we had Jamaicans, we had Cubans. I was familiar with policies like wet foot, dry foot. I knew our issues and our stories and where those enclaves were in my state. When I got to LA though, I didn't know anything about like the Mexican population, and this is 2016. So you've got Trump on stage saying some really vulgar things about Mexicans coming over, and that just led me to dig in even further, just like what is really happening down there? One person told me that there's this amazing women's prison in Mexico, and that they allow the mothers to keep babies up until 6 years old in the prison with them. And it makes the women's population a kinder, gentler population. And then I tried for the first 3 weeks I was there to get access, and I didn't get it. And then I got another fellowship on another part of the border, and I tried again for that 3 weeks, and they just would not give me access. And then, like, right after I left, I got an email, and it said, okay, can you come on this day or in this month? Like, we'll let you in for a couple of days. And I just so happened to talk to somebody from the IWMF, and they said, Melissa, do you have any story ideas left over that you want to get to? We have some grant money left over, and we're afraid if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. So if you have anything you want to cobble together, we can send you back down there. And there was a reporter that I had met from Argentina that I was working really well with on some stuff, and I messaged her and I said, Renee, do you want to go back down there? I finally got into the women's prison. She said, yeah, absolutely. So we went and we spent a couple of days there, and just had this amazing access. We were driving back from the women's prison one day, and I passed this Mennonite community of a bunch of like Plattdeutsch, like old German Canadians who had taken the train down years ago for religious freedom. And I passed this incredible family where all the kids are dressed alike, and I just pulled over and through some broken translation asked if we could take a portrait, and we just started hanging out with the Mennonites and told a story on them. The neighborhood our Airbnb was in Juarez, I saw signs up on telephone poles saying, Lucha Libre fights are coming back. It had been so dangerous there, and it was dubbed the most dangerous city in the world for a couple of years, that people were scared to hold these backyard fights. And so they were coming back while we were there. And I went over to the ring and I just said, hey, can I come tonight with a camera? And he said, yeah, absolutely you can. And so, just hung out and told the story. Like, the community was so happy to have their fights and their entertainment back. And then somebody there at the fights tells me, have you been down to the sand dunes? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like, this is literally 10 minutes from the federal prison where El Chapo is being held, outside of Juarez, and it was like this pristine sandboarding, eighth wonder of the world kind of thing. And so I did this whole story on the other side of Mexico that we don't know. And you just have to keep digging and keep being curious no matter where you're at, keep evolving and how you're telling stories and how you're approaching people. And with that, just keep growing. And so at this point, my newspaper career ended in 2014. I got asked to take a buyout at that point from the St. Pete Times, and I knew I still wanted to be making pictures, and so I just jumped into freelance. And every contact I had ever made, whether it was through a workshop or through a photo a day or whatever, I just let them know, just kind of floated it out there that I was available for freelance work. And my former boss in Fort Lauderdale, Tim Rasmussen, was the DOP at ESPN, and I'd heard about this umpire school happening in Daytona Beach, Florida, and I emailed Tim and I said, hey, have you guys ever covered this before? I can't find anything on it in your archives online, but I'd like to go to umpire school because I've never seen anything on this before. It turns out Al Bello from Getty had shot a great story on it years earlier. But one of the things that I pitched doing was having the umpires do their strike one calls. And so I set up just a gray backdrop, a single light, and anyone that wanted to come into this maintenance shed in uniform and do a strike one call for me. And so I ended up just doing this really fun little portrait series on them. I spent a lot of time. He gave me probably 2 days a week for 6 weeks to go down there and to tell the story of umping. And just working through, learning how to use lights. Like when I was a newspaper photographer, I'd maybe go to Home Depot and buy some strip lights. I'd buy a bare bulb and figure out how I could light something cool with a gel. The lights were always broken and in a closet, missing a wire, and the bulb was cracked, and so my newspaper portraiture was like, I'm gonna turn off these lights real quick. Can I open these blinds? Can you just come stand by this window for me? And we'll do this real quick. I learned really quickly though when I went freelance that people would pay a lot more money for a lit portrait, including alumni magazines, which are some of my biggest clients now. And so this is for Barnard's magazine. This is Nina Shaw. She was one of the lawyers who helped with the Me Too stuff out in LA with the entertainment industry folks. And I made some really nice portraits of her, and then I said, can I try something a little different, and can you give me 5 more minutes? And she's like, yeah, absolutely, whatever you need. I was down shooting just documentary stuff for the New York Times of this tennis star who learned she had leukemia at 18. This is her at 20 making her comeback. I shot her practice, I shot her signing autographs, and then I said, hey, I know this really cool mural in the practice building over there. Can you give me 5 minutes and just let me make a quick portrait of you serving? She's like, yeah, let's do it. I said, okay, I just need 5 minutes. And this is just me learning how to use my lights. And every documentary assignment that I got, I was just I'm just gonna set up just a real quick, big softbox or an umbrella or a strip light and just figure out what the heck it does, because I didn't know lights. And so, the New York Times ends up running this, 5 columns on their sports front. Every assignment, this is literally just a hodgepodge of me pulling people aside after regular old documentary assignments where I'd spent a couple hours with people and just saying, I'm just going to put up this one light on a stand real quick. Can I just make a nice headshot of you and have it on file? Can I make a quick portrait just in case they ever need anything else? And just learning where light falls and how it works. And again, like making mistakes. There's a lot of unusable portraits from back then where I just blew exposure, or I, wasn't thinking about something because I was so nervous fumbling with this gear I wasn't familiar with. And the 10,000 hour rule kind of comes back in, and I just got myself real comfortable every assignment going back out. This is Gary Gensler, he's bigwig in DC. JaVale McGee, who's an LA Laker, this is for ESPN. Just the winningest volleyball badass in the world. And I got to do a day in the life with her and with Carrie Walsh Jennings. And after practice one day, I said, "Can I just shoot some like power pose, like Superwoman portraits of you on the beach real quick before we leave?" She's like, "Yeah, let's do it." This is for ESPN's 25th anniversary of the WNBA. She's a Washington Mystic player, Elena Deladonna. Some comedians, kids, folks in DC that do weird things. And so while you're growing and while you're learning and while you're making those mistakes, you still have to remember who you are and where you came from. Like, remember what it is that makes you tick, because the sooner you can get back to that, the more you're kind of going to fill your soul with the work you're doing. Like, you can make work for your clients or your bosses all day, and that's great, and they're going to be happy. But it's like, ask yourself at some point what makes you tick still. And so one of my first big jobs freelancing was this 4-day shoot back in Tampa for this hotel that was going up. And they said, "Can you just go tell the story of the neighborhood around where this hotel's going?" I said, "I know that neighborhood so well. Yes, absolutely I can. Like, let me go tell stories." I called the tattoo studio, or I'd gotten work done at some point. I said, "Can I come in and make portraits of some of you guys? You guys are right on this block where this big hotel's going in." And just finding little ways to kind of make myself happy on assignment, and just telling stories and being there for moments and putting in the time that moments happen and they've forgotten that I'm there. And so, I ended up with a month-long shoot for Starbucks in Rwanda a few years ago. It was the 25th anniversary of the genocide. And this is Portraiture 101. Like, she had nothing to do with our story except that she lived in the village of a woman that I was photographing from this coffee co-op. And she was so beautiful and so distinguished and came out to watch us. And I said, to my fixer, my translator, I said, could you please ask her if I can make a picture of her? And, and she posed for me. The sky was getting real pretty, just sort of a bare bulb flash off to the right. And, we were driving to the coffee co-op one day, and I see this guy in a suit, in a red hat, walking past a red wall, and I'm like, we have to stop the car. And our translator got out and asked if he would stand in for a portrait for me real quick. And he flashed this huge grin, and I was like, that's the photo. Like, this is the spirit and the happiness, and, and then just trying to make pictures on the coffee co-op. I set up a backdrop of some fabric I bought at the market, and I made pictures of every woman that worked on the coffee co-op that wanted to come pose for me. And we printed them out right there at a local printer and took them all back to them. And just doing the documentary stuff, but finding ways to make those portraits and to make pictures that were making me happy too. I'm a huge soccer fan. I was wearing an Mbappe jersey last night because the Euros are on right now. If there is soccer happening in the vicinity of where I'm making pictures, I'm going to shoot soccer. So I'm at a market where they're buying goats for to take home for slaughter for dinner. And I see these kids kicking balls around a cow field. It's like, I'll be right back, guys. Like, I probably have 30 weird soccer pictures from all around the world that I'll do something with someday, but that's just one of those little passion things that I always kind of want to make a picture of. And just like Rwanda, I knew nothing about it going in, but it's the Switzerland of Africa is what they call it. It's the most green, rolling hills, beautiful place I've ever seen. And just trying to show that to other people that weren't there. Go through, this is just like some weird commercial work, and it's like, these were the pictures I was there to make of this badass free diver woman named Kimmy Warner. And you know, this is the cool stuff in Kimmy's backyard while we're hanging out and she's making us dinner one night. And like just making this weird picture when her friend comes out in a panda head with her spear gun, you know, it's just like, yes, if that picture happens in front of you, make that picture, even if you can only show it to an audience of a couple hundred people at a conference. You know, like, this picture made me so happy that day because it was so weird and so unexpected. But it leads to stuff like this because I got really smart about trying to show that work when I would go to meetings with editors or in promo books I was sending out or little postcards I was dropping off to editors. And so Adidas hired me to second shoot. This is a Spanish Wimbledon star. It was this ad in LA. And so, you know, you're starting to think about brand and logo and how to work the three stripes in. But you're also trying to make these pictures that kind of make you happy, like the one on the upper right of the reflection of her just looking out of the sliding glass doors at this place before the whole day started. You know, and just looking for little moments. You know, she loved playing music. She picked up the guitar whenever she thought, you know, the video crew wasn't filming and just would strum along and sing and, you know, just trying to make cool pictures. And Adidas ended up using a lot of these because they were real moments and they felt authentic. You know, and so that led to this shoot, which is for Cliff Bar. And it was just kind of a day in the life of Rapinoe. I'm on the NC State campus here, and you know, she was playing a game against the North Carolina Courage that week, which is why she was there. And I was just shooting like product packaging stuff. They ended up using a headshot of her that I made kind of cartoonized on the back of the Cliff Bar boxes. But I got to hang out and just kind of make some pictures of like one of my heroes. Like I love soccer and I love watching the women's team be complete badasses. And you know, like Rapinoe walks in and it's just like, yeah, I will absolutely stand behind this net while you kick balls 90 miles an hour at my camera. Like, you know, let's go. You know, you need the moment. NC State was like, hey, can we bring you out a cherry picker? Do you guys need anything else? And, you know, I kind of knew at the end, because the rest of the crew was shooting this from the ground, that I just wanted to be up in those long shadows at the end of the day and her doing her signature pose. And so, yeah, you know, it's like this kind of stuff is what was leading to sort of filling my soul again and telling stories again for big brands like Cliff and Adidas, and just capturing moments. And it was like, it's all Photo 101, right? It's all stuff I was doing 20 years ago at a newspaper. Now it's just for a different client and ideally a little more pay. But, you know, it's still just storytelling and it's still making pictures. And I think if I look at my work now, what I'm most proud of is it's still light and moment and composition, and it's just storytelling. And you know, I hope you guys take something of that back with you, and just remember there are stories on your campus everywhere. Have conversations with everyone. Figure out where those pictures are, and you know, just go make a lot of mistakes and have a lot of fun. But like out of that, grow and make some pictures you're really, really proud of in the process. So yeah, thank you.
Questions?
Absolutely.
You guys hear this? All right, who's first?
Thanks for being here so much. Thanks for all the inspiration. I'm curious about, with the background of you working in newspapers and now your freelance work, how much choice do you have in your style as far as black and white color? Is that a lot of discussion between the client and the art directors now in the freelance world?
Sure.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it I do for me, for my site, just because I gravitate towards black and white. I feel like, especially like at NC State, which is red everywhere, you know, it kind of eliminated some distractions for me, like in the Rapinoe stuff. But I was always smart about it in the newspaper, and those were my biggest fights, because they'd say, well, we have color, we have, you know, we have these CMYK plates, and we fought for years to make our paper color. But like the girl in the window ran in black and white, the motel stuff ran in black and white, and it was all because I could make a a fairly valid argument that like the color was really gross in some of these, it wasn't consistent. Some of the motel rooms were bare bulb, yellow, incandescent, ugly. And it held together as a story a little more consistently in black and white. But for me, it's the purity of the moment. And I could show you the black and white version and a color version, and like you may gravitate towards one and I may gravitate toward the other. I always just loved getting to the moment and sort of reducing, every distraction and every weird thing your eye's gonna go to. And so like for me, black and white is preferred. But I shoot everything in color and let the client make that decision because they're paying the bills, and then I can do whatever I want with it if they don't want it that way. But if you want something black and white, just come up with a good reason. Like come up with an excuse as to why it works better. And it's what I learned at the St. Pete Times was being able to speak to word editors about why a photo worked or didn't. If you say a photo is really cool, like there's no word person in the world, or project manager at a university, or somebody in a marketing department who's going to go like, yeah, that's a cool photo. You have to say, you've got to use their language and speak their words, and like, well, this really works because the impact of this, and blah, blah, So it's like, learn how to speak their language if you really want to sell your pictures. Hopefully that helps. Sorry, I'm rambling. Thanks.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for letting me. Your pictures are beautiful. They made me cry.
Thanks.
And I just love the social work aspect to your photography. Like, that's something I just hadn't really seen before. But my question is, how do you stay safe as a woman photojournalist, especially going into these towns that are not safe, doing things you don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, having those connections and those people that vouch for you is real. I feel a lot more unsafe in the U.S. than I feel overseas sometimes, just because of the proliferation of guns and everything else. Maybe it's an oblivion when I'm overseas as well if I don't speak the language or I'm not as aware. So in those situations, I always have either a writer who knows the language, or I have a fixer who's a translator and sort of a local who knows the area. And I will straight up tell them, like, if something's going to go down, get me out of here. Like when I was in Gaza, I would wade into these situations, and I would ask my fixer to keep his hand on my belt. And I was like, I don't speak the language. If something's turning, because and especially in other countries, sometimes you misinterpret language, loudness for anger, or you kind of misread a scene because you're putting your own American view on it. And I would just say like I love the chaos and I love the energy here, but if things turn and things shift and you need to get me out of here, I'd rather be safe. And you just put your trust in those people. With the motel, the manager, I could call Renee night or day. I could drop into her office when I was there. Trust your instincts though as a woman. Like if something gives you the heebie-jeebies, if like arm hair gets raised and you're like, this is not a good situation, like get yourself out of there. Like no picture is worth that risk. And so I think it's just making calculated, smart decisions, and having people that are kind of watching your back, because you're limited. You're blocked. Your vision is literally blocked by this thing in front of your face, and sometimes you're not aware of what's going on the periphery like you should be. And so it's like, man, if something's going down, like I don't care about this picture, like I want to go home to my family at night, and it's just trusting others, asking people to watch out for you, and then just trusting your own instincts. Thank you.
Hi, Melissa. First of all, thank you so much for being here. Because that was also made me cry. As someone who, as a university photographer, as someone who has to check a lot of other people's boxes and falling into that, how did you fall in love with photography again and shoot for yourself, just for you? And how do you remove the internal pressure to yield a product at the end of it? How do you just like fall in love with it and begin it again?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I obviously am not in your shoes. I'm not a university photographer. I do commercial and corporate work where they have their own boxes to check, and it's similar in a lot of ways where the client expectation is one thing, and I know that that's maybe not the best picture. I just kind of go back to what I used to tell the interns, though, like, I can make a picture for someone else in minutes. Usually that's the easy picture, that's a quick portrait, that's an overall of the scene. Like, if you're given an hour somewhere to like walk into, a pep rally or something, and they're just like, we need an overall to show how many people were here. If you can stand back with a 35 or whatever and make that picture in 5 minutes, and then it's like, you've got 55 more minutes to play. You don't ever have to turn those other pictures in as long as you've done what you need for your boss, right? But sometimes you can say like, hey, I got this really cool moment, like, is there any use for this? And if you start getting smart about trying to work in some of the pictures you like, and that's what I do with some of my commercial clients, is like I'll just slip them into the edit. I know this wasn't on the shot list, but I really keep gravitating toward this moment in the edit, and like, it's kind of this cool thing that shows this. If you guys want it, like, know it's there. Like, I did my job. I'm taking home my paycheck regardless of what they use. And sometimes you have to divorce your ego from that. But you've got to make those pictures that make you happy. And then at some point, you just got to be smart about trying to find little subversive ways to, like, you can get one of those pictures in like a marketing, calendar or something at the end, on a billboard at the end of the year. It's like, hey, that's kind of cool. I did my job there. I made myself really happy by getting my picture on that. It's like, always give them what they've asked for, but then like give them a little bit more. And for me, that little bit more was what made me happy. It's like, my bosses weren't visual, you sit in an office long enough, and sorry if anyone's like, they're a big boss. But like, sometimes you get divorced from the reality of what the situation is, and you kind of forget what it's like on the ground and out there when you're making pictures. And I think it's up to us to come back and say like, I know you sent me out there to do this, and here are those pictures, and they're fine, but like, man, there was this energy, and then I did these portraits out in the hallway because there were all these cool people in costume, and like, if we could ever run these even on social or whatever, like, find little ways to get those done, and like, kind of work in. It'll make you happy. It'll pacify you a little bit, especially on really tough days and really crap assignments. But thank God for social media. Like, I don't know what your restrictions are, but if you've got a personal page and after something is used by your university, put up your favorite one for yourself. Like, just, if that's all it takes to make you happy is to throw it up to show your friends, like, do it, Yeah.
How do you navigate in these journalistic type stories being strictly an observer versus building a relationship and becoming sort of a participant? I even did a motel story. It's like, this gal's going to get kicked out. Like, should I chip in and pay for her to stay or something along those lines? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, and it comes down to personal ethics. I try to remind myself in those situations that I'm there as an observer. I'm a documentary photographer. I'm not here to change the story. And I try to make that clear with people, and like I took Andre a Happy Meal more than once because I knew this kid wasn't eating. Is that changing his story? Like the paper may have frowned on it, but it was like a $2.99 Happy Meal that like I knew this kid was going to eat tonight. There's little things like that where you're like, you kind of have to be a good human being first. And if I ever toe that line where I feel like what I'm doing is going to somehow change the course of what it is I'm photographing, I'm done photographing it. And I can only think of a handful of situations in my career, probably on one hand, where I've towed that line and I've said like, I'm done. I'm not the right photographer for this anymore because I'm too close to this. Or because something changed and, my actions are affecting this story. And you've got to, at least as a newspaper photographer, you've got to be really firm on where your beliefs are, and you've got to be really upfront with your editors about, like, I'm not the right person for this anymore. Here's what I've done. This is all very pure and real, and these moments are authentic, but I'm in too deep. And you gotta be okay with being a good person though sometimes, and just being like, again, like no pictures where, some kids starving at night. Like, I don't want to show this kid in like, you know, in the hospital because he hasn't eaten for a week. Like, yeah, I'm going to take the kid a hamburger. Like, it is what it is. But I'm very comfortable with where my ethics are personally. And I think you know that about yourself after you've done it for a while. And, yeah, I don't think anyone can question me on that. I'm comfortable knowing that my pictures are authentic, and when they stop being, I'm done making pictures of that situation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Melissa. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you. You've been a huge source of inspiration for my career, especially through the newspaper days and beyond, and many others here too. So I just wanted to say that publicly. Thank you. So more technical question, I guess, on a project or a story. Do you ever get, for lack of a better term, writer's block or stuck if you started something and then you just don't know where it's going to go or where you want to take it, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've backburnered a lot of stories in my career because, like, you're just not feeling it. Things have shifted with me or with the subjects or with, you know, just my approach to things. Mentally, I'm not in it. You know, I have a notebook full of ideas, and it's like, I can come back to this if it's important to me, you know, and I think it's important to be honest with yourself that you're not doing the story justice or you're not doing the pictures justice at that point. And like, pick up a fun little project in the meantime, just like, pick up some Polaroid film and go shoot something silly, pick up a different medium and like go do something that just kind of shakes the dust off your brain for a little bit and like gets you making a completely different set of pictures. Like that's always kind of been the MO. I mean, Johnny Andrews and I were talking at lunch today, how do you know when a project's over? And it's kind of the same thing in like knowing when to walk away. Because like we both have projects we could work on for the rest of our lives conceivably, and at some point you gotta move on. Like, or at least say, I'm done with this chapter of it, and I'm gonna come back when I have a fresh set of eyes and a new idea for it, and a new enthusiasm for it. You know, and so like we were talking over lunch, and I think if you have come to a sort of a natural conclusion on something, put it into a zine, put it into a book, make a little blurb magazine for yourself, and like literally close that chapter just for a minute, you know, or like put up the story on your website and let it lie for a little bit, you know, and maybe when you come back to it, if it's worth coming back to, like you'll come back with like renewed vigor and enthusiasm and kind of a new approach for things. I mean, I've been working on a project that I got the Eugene Smith grant for a few years ago on all the Confederate monuments that have been coming down all across the country. And that story's never going to end. There's still 800 monuments up. Like, when is it over? And I've photographed 100 of them so far, and I feel like, you know, a year's worth of work and 7,200-mile drive to photograph this across dozens of states, like, it took a lot out of me. And so what I did was I made a little book dummy, and I'm showing it to people, and I'm going to try to do some gallery stuff and do some wheat paste stuff with some of the work, and kind of close this chapter and let it lie for a little bit. And maybe I'll pick it back up in a couple of years if the time is right, or if there's something else in the news that leads me back to it. But yeah, I mean, hopefully you've got ideas. I know you. Like, the brain never stops, you know. It's like, just go on to something else for a little bit. Just make sure if it's important, it's still there when you want it to be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, hi.
Thank you very much, Melissa. So technically, a lot of us work for like the marketing department, and they want something, you know, like we want this to be happy, so people will come here for school. And can you talk about a little bit about your experience with how that single transaction can be enriched with more storytelling, with more narrative, that like the newspaper skills that you show, like is really, really the best thing we can say about this place or this community. That's, you know, help us with some of the language that we can talk to people with to say, you know, getting into the complexity is really beautiful and it's going to work.
So when I was at the St. Pete Times, it was a really unique situation because it's owned by the Poynter Institute, which is a nonprofit journalism school. And we would take a lot of courses at Pointer where they would come in and do brown bag lunches and sort of talk to us about some journalism stuff. And the one thing I remember Kenny Irby saying more than anything that stuck in my decade there was that ideas are the currency of the newsroom. And he said, if you don't want to do their shitty ideas, you need to have a better one. And just flat out, and I would write it down every time he said it, ideas are the currency of the newsroom. Ideas are the currency of the newsroom. And I think it comes back to you being able to talk their language, but more importantly, maybe having a seat at those tables, when they're coming up with these ideas for marketing campaigns, and just can we have someone there from the photo department just to kind of bounce around ideas, it's a budget meeting and you got a bunch of word people telling you how to go make pictures, maybe we have a photographer in there that can help them sort of bounce around some what the best photo is going to be ideas. But I think it's literally just coming up with your own and not being afraid, I guess, to pitch those and speak up. And just saying hey, can I spitball something with you guys? Maybe we highlight the diversity on campus and we do this portrait project that shows all the faces of, UVU or BYU or whatever. And just how cool is that for other incoming students to see themselves in our student body? Let's do something that highlights this, and it's you coming up with the idea and being, doing the legwork on the research on it, on having the idea on how you're gonna go and produce it, and just kind of saying let's take a chance and let's do this idea. And for me in newsrooms, that was always sort of my MO. Was if I didn't want to go feature hunt, I could bring a story idea to them, and it would be a much better centerpiece than somebody splashing in a puddle or whatever, playing at the beach or whatever. And it's man, if I can go find a real moment and tell a real story, that's a better picture. So I think it's up to you in your situation just to be smart about knowing how to approach your people. But I think photographers having a seat at the table needs to be a priority in marketing departments. I think you guys not being a service department and kind of trying to change that assignment editor mentality for newspapers and saying well, we're not just going to take everything you're telling us, we're going to give too, and we're going to contribute some ideas to this because we've got it. Your university community better than most. You're on that campus, you're walking it, you're talking to people, and it's just go in there and learn how to sell your ideas. It's again, it comes back to what's going to make you happy at some point. If you can go in there and get one of your ideas done a year or a semester or something, it's going to make your job a lot more fun for you. But yeah, speak their language, have some ideas, and just contribute to the conversation on your campuses. So, yeah.
Okay, we got one more question right there.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you so much for speaking today. I think you've given all of us a really good different perspective, and we really appreciate it. So it's pretty evident from your work that you have this way of blending in and not being seen for a lot of your subjects. When I'm taking pictures, I always see people sitting up and adjusting. Who's been pointing his camera at me, and I'm thinking about my jawline. I just, especially with that photo of the girl and her social worker, you hadn't been sitting in front of them, they saw you, and it was so genuine. How did you disappear?
Yeah, it comes back to the earlier question, I think, of just being a human being first, and I probably spend more time with my camera down on assignments than I do up, especially in those situations where it's intimate moments. You don't need to motor drive through that situation. I literally needed a frame of Andre crying at the motel. I needed a frame of Danny and Garrett touching heads, and I probably took 2 or 3 just to make sure eyes were open and it was at focus and whatever, but those aren't the situations to just power through. And so they obviously know I'm there. Especially with Danny and Garrett, I'm probably 5 or 6 feet in front of them. They're watching TV that's right behind me. And I'm literally I'm just sitting down, and my camera's down, and I'm just watching them. And I'm looking, I'm just waiting, I know my focus, I know my light, I have every pose, I'm ready. And then they do this, and you just and that's it. That's all you need in those situations. Everybody knows I'm there as a photographer. Like, I'm not there to be your friend, I'm not there to hang out. And you kind of, especially like the take my picture stuff, like the joke early on, like, they knew I was there to take pictures, they're asking me, they're posing. If I had stayed after that take my picture, they would have forgotten I was there in 5 minutes. Like, especially kids. Kids are amazing in ignoring you. You know, and it's like, let them get the silly stuff out of the way, let them show off for you. It's novel to have somebody there that's paying attention to them and that's wanting to put them in the spotlight. But it's like, give it 10 minutes and they will completely go back to ignoring you 9 times out of 10. You know, and it's like, and if they do kind of catch your eye and you kind of see somebody posing for you, just, man, like, you just do your thing. Like, I'm just here hanging out, you know. I'll drop the camera. Like, if they start posing for me after I've been in it for a while, I'm like, it's all good. Like, I'll take this picture for you guys real quick and, like, you know, I'll send it to you on, you know, over text. But, like, you know, just forget I'm here. You guys just do your thing. And, like, most people are pretty good about that. And just putting in the time and making them real comfortable with your presence and just knowing when to pick it up and when not to. So, yeah.
All right.